Hey there, welcome back to Color and Craft Haven, a little corner of calm where we can slow down, breathe, and add a little color to the day. Today we're diving into something that every single colorist encounters sooner or later: mistakes. Pencil smudges, streaky blends, marker bleed through, colors that looked perfect in your head but absolutely not on the page. We've all been there. And the good news? Most of these whoops moments are either fixable, disguisable, or transformable into something that looks intentional and beautiful. So settle in with your cup of tea, cozy blanket, or your favorite creative snack, and let's explore how to rescue your pages with confidence instead of panic. Before we get into actual techniques, I want to start with a gentle reminder. Coloring is supposed to relax you. Mistakes are not a sign of failure. They're just a part of the creative process. When we get comfortable with the idea that a page doesn't need to be perfect to be joyful, everything becomes so much lighter. So today I'm going to show you how to treat mistakes like invitations. Invitations to try a new trick, to explore a different texture, or simply to see what's possible. Once you know what your tools can do, you can stop feeling nervous about messing up, and suddenly creative freedom becomes a whole lot easier to reach. Let's begin with one of the most common issues: laying down too much color with your colored pencils. Maybe you pressed too hard, or maybe the shade came out darker than you expected, or maybe you simply changed your mind halfway through. Whatever the case, lifting colored pencil is easier than people think. The trick is to try to pull the pigment up from the paper, not to scrub it sideways. A kneaded eraser is your best friend here. Gently dab, twist, and lift. It softens the color without grinding the fibers of your paper. You can repeat this a few times and you'll see the area lighten little by little, almost like magic. Battery-operated erasers are great too, especially for small precision areas. But just remember to go slowly so you don't over-erase and create a bald spot on your page. If those methods only get you halfway there, the next approach is layering strategically. Once you've lightened the area, go back in with a cream, white, or warm gray pencil to blend the leftover pigment together. This doesn't just cover the mistake, it turns the patch into a softer foundation you can recolor on top of. Think of it like using gesso in painting. You're creating a new starting surface. With the right layering, nobody will even know there was an oops moment underneath it all. Now let's talk about streaky or uneven blending. This is especially common when you're working with cheaper pencils, harder cores, or paper that's a little bit too smooth. The key is understanding that streakiness comes from gaps in the pigment. To fix it, go over the area again with tiny, controlled circular motions, using a lighter pressure. This evens out the grain without pushing the color too deep into the paper. A blending pencil or a colorless blender is also incredibly helpful. It melts the colors together without adding anything new. If the streakiness is really stubborn, you can even burnish lightly with just a white pencil to unify everything. Just remember, burnishing is the last step because it flattens the tooth of the paper. Once you burnish, you can't add much more. Speaking of blending, sometimes we get a little overexcited and blend two colors that look amazing next to each other, but they are absolutely terrible when mixed. If you've ever started blending blue into yellow and suddenly found yourself with a muddy green swamp, don't panic. You can treat muddy blending the same way you treat over-pigmented areas. Lift, lighten, recolor. Start by gently lifting the darkest area with your kneaded eraser, then glaze over the mud with a lighter tone that harmonizes the section again. Peach, cream, even a soft pastel tone can usually work. This resets the area and gives you room to coax the colors into the look you originally intended. Now let's move on to something a lot of adult colorists struggle with: marker bleed through. Even high-quality marker paper can betray you depending on the ink load and your pressure. If your alcohol markers have bled onto the next page, the best fix is a combination approach. First, accept the back of the page will almost always be lost. But the other side of the spread doesn't have to be. One of my favorite tricks is using the bleed through as an underpainting. Lay down a base coat of pencil over the shape the marker left. Because the marker stain already provides value and texture, your finished result looks rich and intentional. Another trick is to cover the bleed through with a deliberate background element. Clouds or mist or textured shading, stars, sparkles, maybe an abstract gradient. Suddenly the bleed through looks like part of your artistic plan. But what if the bleed through happened on your main artwork? That's when you turn to creative camouflage. Small bleed spots can be hidden with white gel pens, pastel pencils, acrylic paint pens, or even carefully placed highlights. Turn the dot into a sparkle on an eye, a reflection on glass, or a tiny magic glow in a fantasy scene. If the bleed is bigger, consider turning it into a shadow, fabric fold, or background detail. Creativity isn't always about adding. Sometimes it's about cleverly disguising. Colored pencil smudges are next on our list. Dark pigments like indigo, violet, and black can drift across a page with just one stray swipe of your hand. The fix is surprisingly simple. Place a clean sheet of paper under your drawing hand as you work. But if the smudge has already happened, grab your kneaded eraser again and press straight down to lift the pigment. If the smudge is stubborn, a vinyl eraser or battery eraser can help clean up the edges. And if you're working on off-white paper, a little bit of pastel pencil in the background color can help disguise any leftover haze beautifully. Sometimes, though, it's not about erasing or covering. It's about transforming. Maybe a leaf looks flat, or a dress isn't turning out the way you wanted it to, or your sky gradient looks a little bit patchy. This is when shading and textures become your best friends. Add stippling to turn patchy color into intentional texture. Add wood grain, fur strokes, dot work, or fabric patterns. What once felt like a mistake becomes a stylistic choice that gives the artwork personality. One of the most freeing things you can learn as an adult colorist is that texture solves almost everything. Let's also talk about planning around mistakes before they happen. Keep a scratch sheet next to you so you can test colors before committing. Use light pressure at the beginning of a blend rather than going heavy right away. Place a blotter page or cardstock behind your coloring page anytime you use markers. And if you're using gel pens or paint pens, always wait for them to dry before resting your hand on the paper. Prevention isn't perfect, but it reduces a lot of frustration. Another tip I love is the rescue glow. If you have an area where the color just isn't behaving, add a subtle glow effect around it, especially in fantasy pages. Light halos or magical sparkles, soft illumination, or enchanted mist distracts the eye in the best possible way. Instead of noticing the mistake, viewers notice the creative effect you added. This is one of those techniques that both fixes the issue and adds the charm. Now, what about those pages that you've almost given up on? The ones where the mistakes feel too big or too overwhelming? Before you abandon it, try the 3-layer rescue. Lift what you can, soften what you can't, and then unify everything with a new color overlay. Pastel pencils, pan pastels, soft graphite, or even a full-page color glaze from your colored pencils can turn a chaotic page into a dreamy, cohesive piece. Sometimes that ruined page ends up being your favorite because it forced you to get creative. We've covered a lot today: lifting, blending, burnishing, disguising, and transforming mistakes. But I want you to walk away with one final thought. None of this is about being perfect. Coloring is your time, your sanctuary, your slow movement in a world that asks too much of us. If you ever feel yourself tensing up, remind yourself that mistakes are just part of art. They add character, they help you grow, and most importantly, they remind you that creativity is meant to be playful, gentle, and soothing. That's it for today's Colorful Time. If you've had a funny, frustrating, or memorable coloring mistake lately, tell me about it down in the comments. We can laugh and learn together. Take care, stay creative, and I'll see you in the next one.